Hey guys, it's Barb. Tonight's video was supposed to be about something else. I had planned it out, but the good Lord has intervened and wants me to make it about something else. So, this is the big story about how my mental health journey brought me to my faith journey. So, when I was little, I was raised as a Catholic. There was a lot of things that I thought were hypocritical there. Just little things. I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus and name any names, but there was a lot of things that they would do that didn't make sense to me. I'll give you one example. Like during Lent, you're not supposed to eat meat as a Catholic. You're not supposed to eat meat on Fridays during Lent. And every March they have this little get together. And when they have the little get together, it was always Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So since I was in Catholic school, I would go to for our lunchtime and all of that. And then while the last half of the day or whatever, they would let us, after lunch, we would be able to go and hang out at the bazaar that was going to be running all night long for parents to come up and bring their siblings or whatever. But basically it was like a function where the church made, it was like a fundraiser, I suppose you would say. And it was fun. It was a good time, but it was always during March, and that was smack dab in the middle of Lent. And it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So while I'm in school and we go to the lunchroom, they're selling pizza and hot dogs, like pepperoni pizza, cheese pizza, hot dogs. And I look up and I saw someone of the church who was in, somebody like, they definitely should. They were like a person of the cloth, I guess you would say. And here they are eating hot dogs and pepperoni pizza. So at 15, I approached this person and said, I have a question for you. Why is it? Maybe I was 14. I might have been, I don't know, maybe 13, 14. I don't remember the age exactly, but I know that I asked him, why is it that you're eating pepperoni pizza and hot dogs? Because today's Friday and we're smack dab in the middle of Lent. And he said that it is okay because I've spoken to the Lord and he has given me the ability to absolve everyone today. Which to me, I thought that's a little weird and that doesn't sound right to me. So I literally asked him okay, so God says it's okay for us to eat meat during Lent and break the rule because the church is making money. And then he told me to go sit down with the rest of my class. So it was just things like that. So I started going to churches with my friends, and I started to realize that each church has their own vice. Some of them just like to get together. Some of them like to drink, they drink wine, a lot of wine, and, but then they'll judge alcoholics. I've seen a lot of things, and I just felt like none of these churches seem like they're on the straight and narrow in any way. So I couldn't get behind them. So in my 20s, I had gone to a New Age bookstore. And when I went to a New Age bookstore, I looked around and there was a book on Wiccans. So I bought this book and I read through it. And basically it seemed like legit to me. It seemed like it was the only one that made sense. Yes, people can do bad things with magic or with the Wiccan, but at the same time, some people don't. I believe it's in the heart of the person. So I believed that I was Wiccan for a while. I was just going to be a Wiccan because they believe that if you made a magical potpourri where you pull some herbs from the garden, you plant another seed. If you take of the earth, you give of the earth. And I felt like that was a good thing. And then if you harm anyone, whatever you did will come back times 10. And if you do good things, it would be times 3, which again, I still think it should be times 10, even if you do good things, especially if you do good things, because you made the right choice, you should get the benefit. But hey, I don't make the rules. But in any event, I thought that was the closest thing for me to, to go with. So I was a Wiccan for a while, but I didn't believe in their gods and goddesses and all of that. I just kind of believed in the one true God, and that was it. So whenever I would make a magical potpourri, I would be asking him to take this offering and, send me my blessing. So in any event, that went on for a while. And then for a while, I was when I first left home, I was atheist for a while because I was just rebelling. I was a rebellious teenager, how we do. And I just basically rebelled against religion altogether. So I was an atheist for a while. And then after that, You know, I didn't really go and live my life in the most, well, in the least sinful way. You know, I wasn't doing terrible, terrible sins, but I was sinning. You know, I was young and didn't know any better. So basically, I strayed. And then when I was having my deep depression, I just could not take another day. It just seemed like I was existing and not living. And I, you know, just, I started to feel like, you know, I would talk to everybody. I was going to therapy. I was doing all the right things to try to figure out how to feel better, and nothing would make me feel better. So I basically prayed. I prayed so hard and was like, God, you know, I'm just miserable and I don't feel like feeling this way anymore. And I really need you to help me overcome this, because I don't want this to be my life forever. And it was after I had gone and seen my mother too. My dad had passed away, and then my grandmother had passed away before my father, and it was his mom. And so they had given me this board, and the board had pictures of my grandmother, and she's pictures of her, you know, just throughout her life, different stages of her life. And sometimes she was with the grandkids, and sometimes she was with her kids. And it just was very sad, because I guess because I have bipolar depression and I know how bad depression can get, I can look at those pictures and see that she's just faking it. Like, she never really was happy. And that made me very sad. And I thought, that's terrible that this woman lived her entire life and never found happiness. Like, never felt joy. And, you know, and then I realized my father, it was the same situation. He never really, I think that when me and him reconciled our relationship, he had some happiness. And I think that gave him some peace. I know it did for me. That's another story for another time. But I feel like, you know, with everything that I, you know, saw in the pictures, like being able to see the fake smile, you can see there's some deep pain inside. And then knowing that my dad had that deep pain inside, and knowing that I have my 6 children and I don't want them to ever look at pictures of me and be like, oh, she never found happiness. I want to find happiness so that they can heal. I need to heal so that they can. So I'm doing the therapy. I'm doing the self-work. I'm making these videos, and maybe it can help somebody else do their self-work. But basically, in 2016, one more little caveat. In my 20s, I had been going to therapy back then for OCD, and I got the help that I needed then. But my depression wasn't as severe at the time. I guess because my children were smaller, so I was just working. Because for most of it, I was a single mom for the majority of them. So basically, with that being said, when I had gone to therapy in my 20s for the OCD, they tried to tell me to use meditation. So I tried meditating. It felt silly. I felt it just didn't. I couldn't. It wasn't vibing with me. So I just thought, yeah, that's not for me. So when I got the tickets for driving, I got these tickets, and I guess that was 2016. I got these tickets, and I was, it wasn't a moving violation. I just had like expired tags because I couldn't afford to, you know, I was waiting for my disability to come in, and I didn't have the money to get the tags. I mean, I just didn't have the money for it. So I got pulled over, and they wrote me 6 tickets. Pretty much they were lies. Like, one of the tickets was like willingly driving without insurance, all because I had my boyfriend's car at the time. He had a car and I had a car on the same policy, and he accidentally put the policies in the wrong cars. So when the officer, I called my insurance company while I was pulled over, and they were closed for the day. Well, he came back to the car and said, oh, they said that you don't have insurance and that you're willingly and knowingly driving without insurance, which was not true. 100% not true. I had insurance. I had expired tags. That was the only situation. So he wrote me 6 tickets, which also, hello, I can't afford. If I can't afford to get the tags, why am I going to be able to afford these tickets? So I went home and I started to study and pray about these tickets, because I didn't want to get in all kinds of trouble, because the MBA and the troubles with them is always expensive. So I went home and I started looking at videos, and I was asking God to help me. And I started to block schedule my days, and then I started getting onto the computer, and I said, you know, I had come up with all these ideas I was going to do, and then the depression would kick in and I would never be able to accomplish anything. So I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed that, you know, people were like, oh, just go to the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Look for the light. And I just could never find it. Like, I was like, I've been in this tunnel for years in this bed, and I just don't see any light. There's no light. So I would just constantly pray about it. And then one day I stumbled across a video that was 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours long. And it was a Texas attorney talking about the law. Okay, so he was talking about how we think we know what the laws mean, but we don't, because we're thinking Webster Dictionary definitions. In reality, it's like Black's Law Dictionary definitions. They're legal definitions for words, and we think we know what it means, but we don't. So that got me intrigued. I watched that whole 3-hour video. Well, at the end of the day, I beat those tickets, but that's neither here nor there. Once I was doing all of that, I ended up stumbling across this thing. It popped up in my thing saying "For You" or whatever, and it was called The Secret. It was a YouTube video for The Secret. So I watched The Secret. It was also a book, but I didn't have money to get the book, and the movie was on YouTube, so why not watch it? So I went ahead and I watched the YouTube video, and nowhere in that video does it say anything about meditating. But for some reason, after I watched it, I wanted to meditate. So that Sunday, I decided I was going to, you know, tell everybody in the house to leave me alone. I needed to meditate. So I closed my eyes, and one Sunday, I closed my eyes, and I was like, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to picture myself sitting in a room that's just white walls, white ceiling, no windows, no chairs, and I'm just going to be sitting on the floor, you know, with my legs crossed or whatever, just sitting there waiting to see what happens. So I closed my eyes and I tried to clear my mind, because that was the only way I could imagine. That was the only way I could imagine my mind being clear, is to put myself in this room. So I did that, and then within 15 minutes, well, I don't know really how long it was, because at the end of this, you know, we'll get to that, but it just seemed like a while. And then all of a sudden, Jesus was behind me, like in the flesh, like just and he didn't walk in. There was no doors. He didn't walk in. He just, boof, he was there. And he just put his arms around me and he held me. And I just immediately, the feeling, the love, the acceptance, the unconditional, you know, the love that you could just feel, like, and it overwhelmed me, the feeling. And I just started crying. And he was crying with me. And we just cried. And that seemed like it was 20 minutes. And we just cried and cried and cried. And then when I stopped crying, he stopped crying. And he said, I love you exactly as you are. He said, everything you ever said, anything you've ever done, anything that you think could ever get between us, not possible. I love you exactly. After all the things you've said and done so far, I still love you unconditionally. And nothing will change that. And I said, I feel that. And then he basically asked, he said, I need you to do one thing for me. And I said, what is that? And he said, learn to love yourself the way that I love you. And then he squeezed me tight, and then that was it. I woke up out of the meditation. And when I woke up, it seemed like we cried for a long, long time. And it was literally my whole meditation, from the time I had closed my eyes and last looked at the clock, it had only been like 25 minutes. So right after that, all those ideas I had for block scheduling, all those ideas for, setting a time for everything I needed to do, I was able to do that like literally the next day. Like that night I stayed up and I, planned my entire day for the next day. And I didn't have a calendar book. I couldn't, I just pretty much used my computer and printed it out. I like made one for myself and printed it out. And I used that, and I just kept track of my day like in 15-minute increments. And sometimes things would be an hour, but anyway, you slice it 15-minute increments, and I would always overestimate like getting a shower. I'd put like, okay, that's going to take an hour. It usually takes me 25 minutes in the shower, and that's like to dry off and everything. But I just gave myself an hour so I didn't have to rush. I knew I could take my time. And then I would accomplish everything on my list of things to do every day and still have so much time after the last thing I scheduled was like 10 o'clock at night, or sometimes 8 o'clock. It just depended on the day. But I would always end my day, at a certain time, and then I would have all these hours before I had to go to sleep, all to do whatever I wanted. That wasn't on the list. Because even painting my nails, doing things like that, I always put that on the list. So I have plenty of time to meditate, to do what I want, watch TV, play video games, and then there's no guilt. I had no guilt about it because I had gotten all that stuff done in one day because I stuck to the schedule and, you know, made sure that every moment of my day was accounted for and in doing something that's productive for me. I put breaks in there, lunches, everything, just so that I would make sure I wouldn't miss anything, so I would get everything that I wanted to get done, and then the rest of the night was my own. So that was an incredible experience for me, because being with Jesus, like in the flesh, feeling his touch and feeling him, like the light, it's like, I can't even explain it. The feeling that I got the minute he had his arms around me, it's just, you just can't believe it. Like, you just, all the things you've done and said, you know, even though the Bible tells us he loves us unconditionally, I feel like a lot of times we think like, oh, but I've done some things that I don't think he's going to forgive me for. But none of that's true. None of it. Like, he loves you, and he loves me, and every day he's with us, every minute of every day, and we just have to trust him. And like, when people hurt us, just tell them, like, you're going to take care of vengefulness. I don't have to worry about that. I'm just going to move on, cut people out of my life that shouldn't belong, and accept whoever you do think is necessary for my life in this moment. But everything changes, and there's another episode that's coming called Lesson or Blessing. So you can look forward to that, because that's another part of this, I guess. Not part of the story, but it led me to that thought process. God took me down that workout, like for my mental health workout stuff, like my workbook stuff. So I have a lot of things coming, and I hope that anybody, who is going through anything realizes that I'm doing this to help other people who are suffering with depression, people who feel like there's no way out, people who feel like, I was in bed for like 10 years. It was like a decade of my life I lost to that depression. And in that moment when he was holding me, he literally yanked me out of that darkness. So the whole purpose of this podcast, and for me to talk about all this stuff, and like I said, it will get better, it'll get more organized, it'll be better, like smoother sailing, hopefully, hopefully very soon. I'm trying to make the area more aesthetically pleasing for me, and for comfortable for me, since I'll be spending a lot of time in here making these videos, because God wants me to get the word out, and he wants other people to reach out to him. I did write a poem, which I will read in a short. I don't even do poetry like that, okay? And it's going to be a childish poem, because it's going to be kind of the rhythm, I guess. I don't even know anything about poetry, but it's going to sound like a Dr. Seuss book, but it's good stuff, I promise. But if you're out there and you need some help, and you're feeling down and you're feeling lonely, just know that God loves you. And if you reach out, or you ask him to help you, it may not be what it looks like. Like, you may have imagined, like, okay, I expect him to help me, and this is what it's going to look like. Don't imagine what it's going to look like. Just say, help me, and then go with the flow. Ride the ride. See where it takes you. Sometimes, even if it's something that we think is bad, we're the ones that are defining it as bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't get an apartment one time, and the guy pretty much was ready to give me the keys and sign the lease right there when I went and looked at it. Literally the next day, he calls me and says, I can't rent it out. He's acting all crazy. I can't rent it to you. He's like, it's not ready. And I'm like, it is ready. I just looked at it. We were just in there. And he was acting crazy, and I was upset, and I thought it was a negative thing. But I found another apartment, not a great one, not better. It wasn't as good as that one. But at the time, I had 5 children, and I always clean with bleach. Well, after I had been living in the place I did move, it was probably, I would say, a year, maybe. And all of a sudden, I found out that there was a fire at that house, and the woman that lived there had 5 children. And bleach had splashed out of the bleach bucket when she was mopping and went into the electrical socket, and the house caught fire. So even though at the time I thought that was a negative, I see what he did. Like, maybe that lady, not that it's great that it happened to her, but I mean, her journey, maybe he knows, hey, she's got family she can stay with. I had nowhere to go. So I would be, you know, I would have had nowhere to go if we had a fire, me and the 5 kids. We would have nowhere to go. So at that point, I just feel like, you know, sometimes we have to trust him, even if it doesn't look like we think it's supposed to, or even if it feels like it's negative to us. We should just accept it in stride and say, like, oh, you know, it's what it was meant to be, and he knows best. So I love you guys, and I thank you for watching. Please like the videos, because it helps me reach more people if I get likes, comments, shares, and subscribes. So if you're watching, please subscribe if you're interested, and like and comment and share it with anybody else that you think might need to hear this. But going forward, most of my things are going to be the same as they've been, but it's all, you know, the mental health topics, but I'm also going to be bringing in the God parts. Like, like the questions I ask myself in the mental health ones we've done before, the questions that I've asked myself came from him. I would sit here and say, like, okay, how do I get better from this? How can I get to be able to do this? How can I fix myself in this area? And then the questions would just come to me like telepathically, and I know that they're coming from him, because every single question has led me to better results. So I love you guys, and I will see you again on Friday, and then till then, God bless.